So I'm still in Riyadh, as you can tell by the bags underneath my eye. And I am here for the Future Aviation Forum under the theme of elevating global connectivity. Really an amazing and impressive show that has taken place at the Ritz-Carlton, Riyadh, at the King Abdulaziz International Conference Center, actually where we met, Hannah. And this event was really just very cool. 5,000 industry and government reps from around the world, 30 ministers, 77 leaders of civil aviation authorities, CEOs of airlines worldwide. Get to that in a second. So 120 countries represented. And then, of course, the cherry on top, yours truly, I was there. Just wanted to take some space here to recap the event, which I think, even if you're not like an investor in the space or interested in the space, there's enough that happened at the event where this can be worthwhile for you to understand what Saudi Arabia is doing in the aviation space and also just everything happening in the aviation space. So when you have big events like this, you have eye-popping big number deals that are announced. At this event, 102 MOUs signed, agreements and deals worth over $20 billion. Of course, you probably may have heard that 19 of that 20 billion was a deal between Saudi, which I'll be flying in 2 days, and Airbus for an order to buy an additional 105 A320neo family planes. That's the largest deal that Saudi has done. Actually, that Saudi Arabia has done with a European firm in the kingdom's history. So for those rooting for America, bit of a loss for Boeing, but that's okay. You can't win them all. And they, of course, had a huge deal that they did with Riyadh Air last year. You have big name speakers and interviews on stage, kind of headline making stuff. I don't know if you saw Hannah, Tony Douglas from Riyadh Air give an interview with Richard Quest from CNN, which was pretty interesting. Two entertaining speakers. So definitely worth a watch. I think it's on YouTube now. And if you're working in the industry, in the case of if you're working in the aviation space, aerospace, airplanes, drones, any of that, you are at this event because it's a really great networking opportunity for you to plug in, get some deals done, figure out how you can integrate yourself more into the regional aviation sector. But the more that I get involved with these events, and particularly when you're doing some of the speaker side of things, what amazes me is how much information is coming out, like oozing out of these events in every direction, not just from the speakers on stage, but from the organizers as they're putting out promotional materials and stuff to help you prepare for what you're doing on stage, and then all the booths and different representatives from different companies that are there talking about what they're doing. So there was some stats that came out, and I was trying to write them down on my phone. Like as the event was going on, I was, okay, like that's an amazing stat. I'm sure I'm going to be getting them in from every direction. So some of the things I just wanted to share about what was happening this week in Riyadh at this show. So a couple general stats that were thrown around that are kind of like amazing. 80% of the world's population has never flown on an airplane before, which I don't know, like that seems really high, but I don't know. And then 9 out of 10, all people will not get on a plane this year. So that's also seems kind of high. I don't know how that sits with you, Hannah. We can talk about it in a second. Tragically, while the forum was going on, a passenger on a Singapore Airlines flight from London was killed. More than 70 people were being treated for injuries. That happened almost exactly at the same time as a panel discussion on, is air travel safe? Of course, the answer is yes, but these anomalous events do happen. And actually, turbulence deaths are quite rare. The last time that it happened in America was 1997. Turbulence is on the rise from climate change, of course. But anyway, that happened actually exactly as a conversation or panel was taking place, which was very interesting. And then specifically to Saudi, obviously showcasing the investment opportunities that they had. They're targeting 330 million passengers by 2030, the ability to go to 250 destinations worldwide, seeking 4.5 million tons of cargo by 2030. In general, the kingdom says it's still targeting 3.3 trillion in investment by 2030. And the forums was looking at how they could showcase all the money they're putting into aviation these days in the run up to 2030, 100 billion into the sector, 50 billion in airports, 40 billion in aircraft investment, and 10 billion in support and logistics. GACA says there's $53 billion and 958,000 jobs across various regions that has been created in the past 10 years from the aviation sector. And they're looking to increase the size of the sector by tenfold by 2030, which is, I mean, that's a huge leap. But that's the goal, and it's out there, and that was put out there. But anyway, so there's just so much stuff that comes out of events like this, and it was kind of cool to be there, to see it, to like take it all in, write it down, share it with you guys. So just a pretty cool week, and a definitely kind of like a fun event because everybody can kind of relate to seeing airplanes, drones, and stuff. It was awesome.
It's like a really fantastic event. I mean, as you said, I've been to some of these events and they're really overwhelming. Just so many people, so much information, really hard to absorb. And you leave and just try and process all of that. So I really appreciate that you did take those notes and wrote down some of those stats. Even if they're really kind of difficult numbers to wrap your head around, there's some incredibly ambitious targets that you've just laid out. And I think it's, again, I don't think it's difficult to believe that 80% of the world has never flown. That still leaves about, 2 billion people that have been on airplanes and gone places. So that's a lot of people. And if you really just think about income levels and appetite, I mean, I don't remember what the percentage is, but I believe that in the United States, very few people have passports. So like people don't really leave countries a lot of the time, especially bigger countries where there's a lot of travel to happen within the borders of your own country by car or just different means of transportation. And then I know a lot of people, especially after the pandemic, that have decided that they don't really want to travel. I've heard a lot of Saudis say, I couldn't really travel during COVID, and now I don't really feel like I need to because I have everything that I want here in the kingdom, and I can travel by car and I can go different places. There's more freedom of movement. So there's just different appetites for different experiences that people have. However, obviously that's not what you were talking about this event. You were talking about the other 2 billion people that are traveling the world and how we want to increase the number of people that are exposed, which again is something that I think is really important. Because it means that more people are, just getting exposed to all sorts of different cultures and experiences. And I think Saudi is uniquely positioned in the world to be a central place where people stop over, just like the rest of the GCC states, but maybe see a new place and experience something different. I am a little bit partial to Boeing, considering that I spent my childhood going to where its headquarters used to be in Washington State. So Everett, Washington is where Boeing was. I knew a lot of people that worked there. So yeah, I mean, it's great that Airbus is getting the business. Boeing's been going through a bit of a rough patch lately. Pun intended, unfortunately. And also, I'm really nervous about this, Singapore turbulence situation because I'm about to do a London-Singapore trip, and I saw that headline, and the first thing I was thinking, oh my goodness, maybe I don't want to go to Singapore.
So there's a couple things you said that I want to kind of address, if that's okay. Number one, no congrats to Airbus. We need Boeing to win these deals, and they are going through a little bit of a rough patch now. I'm not sure that affected the deal, to be honest. I'm sure if you asked Saudi, they'd say, no, it's just we decided to go with Airbus. But Boeing is going through a rough patch right now, and that's okay because they are a terrific company. Huge fan of what they do. They were definitely had a very strong presence there. And so sure, they're going through a rough patch now, but they are a resilient company and they will be fine. So I wanted to say that because huge fan. And I've never even been to Everett, Washington. So my bias is much larger. It's at the country level, but it's good for Saudi Arabia to have some choices, right? I mean, if it did come into play, it was nice for Saudi Arabia to be able to say, well, look, your competition isn't going through the same thing. So for this order, for this aircraft, and at this time, we're going to go with Airbus, and that's okay. Secondly, the turbulence thing, like wearing your seatbelt on a flight, I used to be like, well, to be honest, if this plane is crashing, this seatbelt is going to make no difference at all. But when you think about turbulence, sure, turbulence is scary, man. When you're in, you get it and it's kind of gnarly, it just triggers the thought in your brain that you're on this flight and if this thing goes down, you have no control of it. Of course, I'm saying this now, psyching myself up for a flight in about, 36 hours? Yeah, so hopefully I'm sleeping for most of it, but we'll see. And you mentioned another thing, which I think is interesting, which is the change in how people traveled because of COVID. At first, it was no travel at all. Airlines were hurting. And I feel like travel is back, certainly at certain classes of flying. Prices are way more expensive than they were before. There's this weird still kind of adjustment going on in the industry. But in Saudi Arabia, what you also had is people saying, I'm not going to go abroad. I'm going to go within Saudi. So like they're still getting on a flight most of the time, although they don't necessarily have to, but they're getting on a shorter haul flight. Of course, Saudi Arabia's push for tourism affecting people's desire to go to Dubai from Saudi when they're trying to hope to keep people staying in the kingdom spending that money, or Bahrain. Obviously, the climates are different from the destination, but it's like you're seeing a shift in pattern there. And then, of course, you're also seeing Saudi Arabia trying to position itself as more of a hub and a transit area. So like if you're going to Asia, like, and you're coming from the US and going to Asia, they're trying to get the people to fly through Riyadh instead of Doha or Dubai. So obviously, too, one more thing. Sorry, I was super interested in this because the airport, there's a huge display of it. And it was kind of, I think, probably a graphic or an image we had seen before, but it was like it kind of gave sense of like how big this thing's going to be. And who knows if the new airport, which we talked about on the show, but it's just kind of cool to see those things and kind of touch and feel in a way what's happening in Saudi Arabia in this space specifically. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, it is cool. I mean, the thing with airports too, though, is like I'm very excited about the new massive airport in Riyadh, but you also hope to have a bit of international travel going through some of the other airports. As we mentioned, British Airways is coming back to Jeddah. I mean, obviously they are flying back and forth to Riyadh and London, but also going to Jeddah, going to Dammam, hopefully at some point. But I remember speaking to some people from Hayel who were saying that they would love for Hayel to also be an international airport. So I don't think that you need to restrict it to just the biggest airports, because sometimes just having more people coming through the country and thinking about the different airports is interesting as well. I mean, think about how many airports people can fly in and out of in the United States. Obviously, Saudi's what? The size of Texas, everybody always says. I think it's not necessarily that accurate. So it's not like as big as the United States, but it still is quite a big country. And then inside, you still would need to travel, let's say, between Riyadh and Jeddah would still, or Dammam and Jeddah would still take you about 3 hours. So, interesting to think about aviation across the kingdom's airports.
Yeah, and then
an expansion across the airports.
And within this sector as well. Like, so like we talked about this before, but you're seeing kind of the differences now between Riyadh Air and Saudia. I did an interview on stage on the second day of the forum with Khalid Al Natour, who was CEO of Mukamala, which is Saudi Aramco's like aviation division, the second division formed within Aramco, so they could do exploration and cool stuff like that. 50 aircraft, a bunch of helicopters, 13 airports that they're operating. Super interesting story and guy. They've spun it off now to be its own company with their largest client being Aramco, but now they're looking to do more B2B and B2G stuff. It was such a cool opportunity. He has given me a verbal agreement that he will be coming on the show. So we're going to work for that. And last point, if they ever introduce a DC to Dammam, which is already kind of a mouthful, then I'm coming to visit you and Aziz, and you're going to probably wish they didn't offer that flight. But yeah, I mean, Dammam is I've flown in through Turkey to Dammam, and kind of a convenient way if you're going through Europe. So anyway, what I'm saying is let's include Dammam and let's keep it in the conversation because it's a good airport.
You're welcome, as long as you bring Coco.
Okay, Coco. Well, listen, Coco's bringing me, I think is the best way to say it. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing Coco and Pierce. And yeah, I've had a 3-week run here in Saudi Arabia, so it's getting a little warm for your boy. 115 degrees today in Riyadh. It's okay though, just not great for a suit. We are now off topic. Let's get to the news.